recording. Okay.
Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Margaret Kristen, and I am the Vice President of Long-Term Care and Community Inclusion for iCare. iCare is a health plan that operates a variety of programs, including Family Care Partnership and SSI Managed Care. We're very glad you're joining us and our speakers for this session today, Voting in the Time of Pandemic, Part 2. This is really a training for individuals in all of our organizations that work more directly with the members we have the privilege of working with and serving. iCare, like everyone on this call, I'm sure, is very, very committed to doing everything we can to support individuals with disabilities and older adults in living fully inclusive lives. And when I had the opportunity to hear some of the people you'll be hearing from very shortly talk about some of the issues and challenges that people with disabilities face in a most fundamental right that and civic duty that we all have to vote. It dawned on me that while we have come so very far in our ability to allow and to work with our members to support their ability to live fully inclusive and full lives, even this one seemingly small task or duty or right, there's still work to do in this area. So we're very, very glad that you'll be hearing from the speakers today as we all learn a little bit about steps we can take to make a difference in this area. So I'm going to turn it over now to Jenny Newgart, who will do some housekeeping points and then introduce the next speaker.
All right. Thank you, Margaret. I'm Jenny Newgart. I'm a grassroots community organizer for the Wisconsin Board for People with Developmental Disabilities. And I'm part of the Disability Vote Coalition, which Barbara will go into more detail about. But BPDD and Disability Rights Wisconsin work together on that initiative. So I'm going to start out today by just a couple quick housekeeping things. Everyone was muted when you came into the room, and we ask that you stay muted throughout so we don't hear dogs and kids and spouses in the background. We will be taking questions at the end, but if you don't want to forget your question, feel free to put it in the chat box. Anytime you think of it, that's the way we'll be taking the questions ultimately anyway. Also, if you have any problems that you're not sure how to deal with the Zoom, you can put that in the chat box. That will be monitored throughout, and we can do our best to help you deal with anything that might come up. Along those lines, we have found that sometimes if you turn your video off, your camera off, your connection is much better. So you can feel free to do that. Give yourself a break on Zoom if you'd like. The PowerPoint resources and a link to this recording is going to be available within a day or two, and that will be emailed to everybody who registered. And we will also put it on our website, disabilityvote.org. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Barbara Becker to start the presentation. And just let me know when you want me to advance the slides, Barbara.
Great, thanks, Jenny. Good morning, everyone. I'm Barbara Beckert with Disability Rights Wisconsin and Disability Vote Coalition, and we're so happy to have you here today. I want to thank iCare for elevating the importance of voting, especially in this time of pandemic, and for their partnership in hosting these trainings. And I want to thank all of you and your agencies for your commitment to ensuring that more voters with disabilities and older adults can assert their right to vote. You know, this month we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And although we have made a lot of progress in ensuring inclusion and equality for people with disabilities in our country, I think some of the challenges we'll share with you today will make it clear just how far we still have to go. And with your efforts, we have the opportunity to make some real progress. Next slide. Here's our lineup today. We've got some great folks who are on the ground, on the front line, working with voters, and also bring a lot of knowledge of policy and resources that can help you. So we'll introduce each other as we navigate through our time with you today. Next slide. Wanted to just tell you briefly about the Disability Vote Coalition. All of our organizations are members of the coalition, and we invite you to join with us as well. We're a nonpartisan effort to help ensure full participation in the entire electoral process of voters with disabilities. The coalition's coordinated by Disability Rights Wisconsin and the Wisconsin Board for People with Developmental Disabilities. And we have a great number of organizations across the state that are part of this partnership and are members. And we would welcome you to join us as well. All you have to do is go to the disabilityvote.org website. You can sign up there to be a member of the coalition. And whoops, I see we have a technical question. Maybe someone can respond to that in the chat. Jenny, could you take that one? Anyhow, if you go to the disabilityvote.org website, you can sign up to be on our mailing list and to be a member of the coalition, and we welcome your active involvement. In addition, our Facebook page has a lot of great resources. Please like it and share, especially this week. This is really our kickoff activity for National Disability Voter Registration Week. We've got other events coming up, including an event on the 16th that will feature some voters with disabilities. So we invite you to join us. Do we have a little technical difficulty here? I see Jenny's asking if others are seeing the slides. It sounds like they are. Great. Terrific. We've got the yeses there. So Jenny, I'll help troubleshoot with the individual who's having some difficulty. Next slide, please. So we wanted to start out by talking a little bit of some of the historical barriers for voters with disabilities. My agency, Disability Rights Wisconsin, has a voter hotline that's open all year. So we do hear from a lot of voters, either who call us or make contact through social media and ask for assistance with concerns. We also conduct audits for the Wisconsin Election Commission of polling places on election day. Those aren't happening this year because of the pandemic, but it really gives us a front eye perspective of some of the challenges for voters. So some of the barriers historically, accessibility concerns at polling places. I'll share some examples of that with you in a few minutes. We've got some photos to add to the stories. Requirement to speak name and address and failure to provide accommodations. That was something that we ran into in the elections in 2018. Deaf voters who communicate with ASL were being asked when they went to cast a ballot to speak aloud their name and address, and they were not being accommodated. We actually had one young man who was told, if you don't speak your name and address, you will not receive a ballot and will not be able to vote, which was outrageous. And in fact, because of the Americans with Disabilities Act, he should have been accommodated. He wasn't, and his father had to get involved. He was an attorney, and to address the concerns. So as a result of that, we worked with the legislature to get the law changed, which took quite a while, but we're glad that the change is in place. But why was it necessary in the first place? Some of the other challenges that we've seen, accessible voting machines are supposed to be at every polling place. The accessible voting machines are not always there. They don't always work, and often poll workers aren't knowledgeable about how to use them. Voter ID can also be a challenge. I got a heartbreaking email recently from the sister of a voter with a disability. Her brother lived in northern Wisconsin. He was homebound because of MS. He wanted very much to vote. She wrote to me, he was in a wheelchair, he needed a medical van or cab. I asked his social worker to get him to the DMV to get a photo ID for voting. She never would. The last year of his life, he wanted so much to vote, but he wasn't able to get to the DMV, so he was never able to vote. So that was heartbreaking on a couple of fronts. First of all, because he couldn't get a photo ID, but actually if his social worker had a better understanding of the law, or his family, or the individual, it would have known that because of a Wisconsin law that addresses people who are indefinitely confined, he didn't need an ID. So we'll be talking more about that today. And I hope you'll be able to help some of the members you work with who may be facing those kinds of restrictions unnecessarily. So those are some examples of some of the concerns that historically we've heard about from voters. But now with COVID-19, there's a whole host of new barriers. If you want to go to the next slide, please. Oh, these are the pictures I mentioned. So this is from an accessibility audit that we did at a polling place. The entrance to the building was not accessible. So there was a sign directing voters with disabilities to a door. And this is what it said on the door: handicap entrance, knock hard, or call this number to gain access. Of course, a voter who had restrictions related to their disability may not have been able to see the sign. They may not have had the ability to knock hard. I know I had to knock pretty darn hard for them to come and open the door for me, and I don't have a physical disability. So this is a polling place that certainly was not accessible. Next slide. Okay, here's another example of a polling place that was not accessible. This was at a church. Walked into the church, the very first thing you saw were stairs. So many people would not be able to navigate those stairs. And here was a lift chair, which looked like maybe I don't know, a 10-year-old child might have been too large to fit in that lift chair. And certainly someone who used a power wheelchair or had difficulty transitioning from their chair to the scooter would not have been able to use it. So that polling place was inaccessible for a significant number of voters with disabilities. Next slide. All right, so this brings us up to the present, and wanted to share with you some of the particular issues that we saw coming up during the pandemic. These were barriers that were reported during the April and May elections. So again, these are the kinds of things where we hope the training you get today will allow you to make a difference for your clients. People with disabilities and older adults are at high risk for COVID-19. So that's why voting has really become a public health issue. In our training today, we called Voting in the Time of Pandemic, because it's really made the whole challenge of voting much more difficult for people who already had a lot of barriers. In addition, there's been confusion in a changing environment. So many things have been going on in the courts. Just a few weeks ago, there were some new restrictions related to our elections for this year. As a result of it, a lot of voters have been disenfranchised. I mentioned before that it can be hard for people to get to the DMV to get a photo ID for voting. And this is important because so many people with disabilities and older adults are non-voters. Well, during the pandemic, DMV was open by appointment only. And although they are transitioning, even now, some of their offices are not open. Here in Milwaukee, their office downtown on 6th Street has yet to reopen. That's a very important central location. We heard from a lot of people about absentee ballots that were later did not arrive. I heard from one older adult who said she requested her absentee ballot on March 22nd, still had not received it. I'm 80 years old, disabled and ill since February 2020. There are days I'm not able to get dressed. What can I do? This is not my fault. As of Monday, I don't have a ballot. I never miss an election. So I guess my vote doesn't count. She was enrolled in IRIS. So this is someone who's receiving long-term care services this could have been a situation where, with the effort that we're putting in place now, maybe someone from her IRIS consultant could have assisted her with getting a ballot and finding another way so that she'd be able to vote. Difficulties regarding the witness requirement was also a barrier for some voters. We were contacted by a college student who lived in a dorm. She had a disability because of college's closing due to the pandemic. She was the only one left in her dorm. She didn't know anyone else on campus or in town, and she was scared because of the pandemic to approach someone she didn't know to get them to act as a witness. So she contacted us for assistance. No special voting deputies in care facilities. During normal elections, those are specially trained individuals who are sent by the municipality to nursing homes and CBRFs, and they provide on-site absentee voting to assist individuals and facilities to vote. That didn't happen this time. You know, we were contacted by a young woman in her early 30s. She had recently been placed in a nursing home, was in a community that she hadn't lived in before. She always voted and was very concerned about having the opportunity to vote, but no assistance was available to her from facility staff. We were able to talk with her about it. She requested an absentee ballot. It did not arrive until election day. So she completed it. It was mailed, but whether her vote actually counted is another question, because it had to be postmarked election day, and that may not have happened. Another issue for those who voted in person included long lines, lack of curbside voting, issues with failures to provide accommodations. So just a couple of quick examples to give you a flavor of what we heard. My husband and I are both disabled. We drove to the voting site 5 times throughout the day, and the line was so long and no curbside voting was available. Neither my husband or I can stand in line for 4 hours because of health issues. Therefore, we did not get a chance to vote. I'm sure there are other people this happened to. I would like to start a civil suit against the state of Wisconsin for taking away the right to vote for disabled Americans. That was in Green Bay. We also heard with the care facilities about from someone in northern Wisconsin. He was told he wanted to go and vote on election day. He was told, if you leave, you can't come back. So he had to choose between going out to vote or having a place to live. So he was pretty distressed about that. He said that he would have liked to vote absentee, but that no assistance was provided, and he didn't know how to go about doing that. So again, this is something where your assistance can really make a difference. Let's see, last example that I wanted to share had to do with accommodations. So one of the things that you'll hear about today is that different accommodations are available for voters with disabilities. One of them is that if someone needs assistance to vote, they can get assistance. It just needs to be documented when they complete their ballot. So this young man had voted in the past, received assistance. In fact, he actually knew the poll worker who had assisted him last time and was going to get assistance from him. But another poll worker came over who was very aggressive and said, you aren't allowed to have assistance. And if you need assistance, you're not allowed to vote. She wasn't wearing a mask. He felt very unsafe because of the way that she approached him so aggressively without a mask on. And he ended up throwing out his ballot and leaving. And he said he doesn't know if he's going to vote in the future. So these experiences can be very upsetting for people. The right to vote is such a fundamental vote, and people feel very strongly about it. So you really have a chance to make a difference, we hope, with the information that you'll take back to your agencies today. Next slide. All right, I'm going to turn it over now to our wonderful colleague and partner, Janet Zander, with the Greater Wisconsin Agency on Aging Resources. Thank you, Janet.
Good morning. I'm so happy to be here today. I am Janet Zander, and as you have heard and seen from Barbara, voters faced many barriers to voting in the April and May elections. And voting, while it can pose challenges for many, and at any time, certainly we are seeing an increase in those challenges during this pandemic. So I want to talk a little bit about what your role could be and why that's so important. I see you all as essential workers, not only pre-pandemic and during, but post-pandemic. You're going to be there continuing to serve your members and your communities throughout this process. That makes you really trusted points of contact for your members. Your ability to regularly communicate with your members via your newsletters, websites, phone calls, emails, letters, virtual meetings that you might be having, you have a connection to the members in your community. You are already addressing many of their basic needs like personal care, medication, access to healthcare and food. I want you to think about voting as one of those other essential basic needs. Your members are going to need to figure out how to plan ahead if they're going to be able to safely navigate how to vote during this pandemic in a way that keeps them safe, right? So just as you've been helping them with all the other essential basic needs, we'd like voting to be on that list of things that you can help with. In addition to voting being not only a civic responsibility and a right that that many of your members have, during this pandemic, it has become a public health emergency. You heard from Barbara the decisions people had to make. Do they want to not vote? Do they want to risk their health in voting? Do they want to risk becoming homeless, God forbid, in voting, right? Like, these are the kinds of challenges that people face. But with some pre-planning, we believe that you and we together can make sure that they can vote safely. And know that you're not going to be faced with doing that alone. You have all of the resources of the Disability Vote Coalition, the hotline, the League of Women Voters, and other things that you're going to hear about today, as well as additional resource links that you're going to have, so that your organization can feel confident in developing a plan that would actually support your members to vote to take care of voter registration, to take care of their absentee ballot applications, which is by far the safest way for individuals to vote, but also to address any other needed accommodations. So we look forward to not only providing you this information, but addressing your very specific questions. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about how can you support your members to vote safely? Well, it starts with really helping them to develop a plan. Looking at, as we're going to provide you in a little bit, some of the deadlines around registration and mailing in absentee ballots. We know that many of the challenges that people faced were because they ran up against timelines. We want to get ahead of the game by making sure we're not running up against deadlines that might make their vote not count, that might mean they don't get a ballot in time. So we want to be part of that planning process with you to make sure that people get the information they need in a timely fashion so that their vote can count. To really take a look at your organizations and identify who's in a really good role to provide forms, to make sure forms are available on websites, to put links in newsletters, to have hard copy forms that could be delivered. Who's in a position to offer assistance, whether that assistance is in person, on the phone, via email? Who could provide that additional assistance that so many voters need to just get over the hump? They have a snag on one area or another, like a signature that they need. How can we make sure that they're supported all the way through the process? That plan that would define your roles and responsibilities around assisting them could really make sure that we can do something that's very person-centered, recognizing that each person is going to need a different type of help. It starts with making sure that application forms are available. These are all available on a link from the Wisconsin Elections Commission. They're available online. We can provide assistance online at myvotewisconsin.gov. where we can help people start the process with voter registration. Are they already registered? We need to know that for each member who wishes to vote. We need to know, are they already registered? If not, we need to provide them assistance in completing that voter registration. And you're able to do that with them by mail and online. You can assist members who need a photo ID. You heard Barbara discuss some really sad, stories around people who weren't able to get that or maybe didn't even need that. So is this something that your members need? And can we make a plan to make sure that they have access to the DMV and can get those photo IDs for voting? If they're planning to vote absentee, and we certainly hope many are, can you help them apply to get a ballot? For some of our members who've already are registered, may be getting applications for an absentee ballot, but not all will and not all are registered. So can we take that next step and make sure that everybody has applied to receive an absentee ballot? If they are planning to vote in person, we would certainly be encouraging early in-person voting, avoiding those long lines and crowds and things that you heard Barbara talk about that occurred at the polling sites. We don't anticipate that the elections in August and November will look much different, and in fact could look even worse as we get into November, both from a disease standpoint and also from the fact that we're looking at a presidential election. So we need to really plan ahead and plan to do, whether it's voting in person absentee or voting online or by mail absentee, getting those things done early. Again, all those forms are available, and you'll hear lots more about that, but your role is there to make sure that your members can vote safely during this upcoming election. Next slide, please. So there's some key dates that you need to be aware of as we move forward. And some of these dates are coming up very quickly for our August 11th election. In this election, we're going to be voting for all of our congressional representatives. So not our senators, but our congressional representatives. We're going to be voting for our assembly representatives here in the state of Wisconsin. We are also going to be voting for our state senators in our even numbered districts. So about half of our state senators are up for re-election. And so we're going to be looking to fill those seats. These are critical positions that determine public policy that impacts us and those we represent every single day. So it makes it a very important election. This is a partisan primary for these elections, and it will determine who's on our final ballot in November. So while the focus, people, we tend to think about, oh, the November election is the presidential election. There's a lot leading up to that that is also very, very important. The timelines for that start already by July 22nd. So here we sit on July 13th, thinking about the fact that that's less than 10 days away, that we run up against the voter registration deadlines for those who wish to register by mail or online. Again, in person is not an option for a lot of people in order to do that safely. So getting those requests in soon will become really important for anyone who wishes to vote in the August election. That follows with the deadlines to request an absentee ballot. On August 6th, we have all regular voters who by 5 p.m. need to have requested their absentee ballot. And for those who are indefinitely confined, and you heard Barbara talk briefly about those voters, they'll have an additional day till 5 p.m. For returning those ballots, we have until August 11th at 8 p.m. That's the day of the election. Again, we want to make sure that people are able to have plenty of time to mail in those ballots if they're voting absentee or have done so by absentee voting in person. And we aren't going to run up against that time crunch that happens when we drop it in the mail and hope that it gets there in time to be counted, right? And we don't want people to have to show up at the polls to drop off their ballots in person, risking their health if we can avoid doing so. And planning ahead will allow us to make sure that we have given up enough time for that. Next slide, please. The November election, which, you know, seems a little further away, but we all know just how quickly time flies sometimes, is a very big election. We've got the general election for president. We've got now our final election for our US representatives, for our even numbered state senators, our assembly seats, as well as all county district attorneys. So it is a big election. We expect a very big turnout. It may come at a time where our state and our residents are faced with not only the COVID-19 pandemic, but also the influenza startup and influenza and pneumonia. So this is, again, a time where we really want to keep voters safe and be able to allow them access to voting without putting their health and safety in jeopardy. So looking at these deadlines, you've got voter registration deadlines by mail of, you know, roughly mid-October, online by mid-October, and in person by November 3rd. So again, that's election day. Remember, we can register in person on voting day. We are encouraging people not to wait that long, but in Wisconsin, we are allowed to vote, to register on voting day, as long as we bring all of our materials with us, and you'll be hearing more about that. Our deadline for requesting an absentee ballot for regular voters will be October 29th at 5 p.m. For those indefinitely confined will be October 30th at 5 p.m. And then our deadline to return our absentee ballots, of course, is election day by 8 p.m. on November 3rd. These key timelines and dates will help us work on our own agency plans to assist individuals, but also on those personalized plans to ensure that everyone who wishes to vote is able to vote and do so safely. I'm going to turn the slide.
Janet, this is Zoe. I have a clarifying question.
Okay.
Zoe, we're gonna do questions at the end, or you can type it in the chat box.
Can I just ask Jenna a clarifying question? Jennifer, is that cool?
Well, we need to wait until the end so we can get through all our slides.
No, just really quick. One thing.
What do you have, Zoe?
So if you're calling from another state, can you still vote in Wisconsin? Is that correct?
Well, you need to follow your state's rules,
Okay.
which may be different than what you're hearing here.
I'm from Portland, Oregon.
Right.
Janet,
Yes.
I heard this through Facebook and stuff. Yeah.
So yes, everything that we're describing here is the process for those who are residents of Wisconsin, and there are some residency requirements for voting. So it would not apply to the timelines and dates necessarily for you in Oregon.
Okay. If I still wanted to hear this, could I?
Of course.
Okay. Sorry, Jen, go ahead.
So I'm going to turn the slides over to Eileen, who's going to talk. Eileen is with the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin, and she's going to talk with us about voter registration and the specifics of how to. So welcome, Eileen Newcomer.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Eileen Newcomer. I'm the Voter Education Manager for the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin. And we are a nonpartisan nonprofit organized of women and men committed to making voting free, fair, and accessible to all. Our mission is to empower all voters and defend democracy, and we're a really proud partner of the Wisconsin Disability Vote Coalition. We're staunchly nonpartisan, meaning we don't support or oppose any candidate or party. And
can I ask you a question?
sure.
So you said you're the part of what committee again? I forgot.
The League of Women Voters of Wisconsin, and we are part of the Wisconsin Disability Vote Coalition.
I'm from Portland, Oregon, Ellen, and yeah. I just want to share a little background,
Okay,
about me.
great. Yeah, I think you mentioned that earlier as well. And so a lot of this information, or basically all the information that we're talking about, is specific to Wisconsin, but there definitely are takeaways that you can kind of think about in Portland, especially about the importance of, voting early, voting absentee, understanding the
Can I ask a
laws.
question?
What?
How
I think I'm gonna keep going, Zoe.
how old do you have to be to vote in Wisconsin?
I will be covering that in just a second, but you have to be 18. Okay. Anyway, so the point of me showing this slide here is basically to show you the map of Wisconsin and where our local leagues are in Wisconsin, and to identify for you that if you're in a community with a local league, they're a really great partner in any of your, get out the vote activities. They'd be more than happy to partner on a voter registration drive or providing assistance with the witness requirement or different things like that. So, as we go through this, keep in mind of who you can reach out to for partners as we do this work together. So my next slide is about voter eligibility, and that gets to Zoe's question about who is eligible to vote in Wisconsin. I do want to quickly acknowledge that not everyone is eligible to vote, whether because of their citizenship status, their age, their felony status, or because of a guardianship decision. So in order to vote in Wisconsin, you must be a US citizen, you must be 18 years or older on or before election day. You must have resided in Wisconsin for at least 10 days. I do want to flag this one requirement because it will likely change to 28 days here in the near future, but for right now, it is 10 days. You're also eligible to vote if you're not currently serving a sentence, including incarceration, parole, probation, or extended supervision for a felony conviction. And if you've not been determined by a court to be ineligible to vote, for example, through a guardianship decision. And there are two ways people might lose their right to vote due to allegations of incompetency. The first is under the process for appointing a guardian. If an adult is found by the court to be incompetent, the guardian for the person will be appointed. As part of that process, the judge or court commissioner will determine if the person should lose their right to vote. The second way that somebody could lose their right to vote due to allegations of incompetency is if the person is through a petition with the circuit court that's been filed for the sole purpose of finding that person incapable of understanding the objective of the electoral process. There's more information available in the Disability Vote Coalition's Competency, Guardianship, and Voting in Wisconsin brochure. And I'm sure if people have more questions or want more detail, we could talk about it later in this session. So for voter registration, who needs to register to vote? You need to register to vote if you're a first-time voter, if you've moved, or if you've changed your name. So even if you moved from one apartment to another apartment in the same building, you still need to re-register. And this is one of the things that you can kind of help people identify in your network, whether or not they need to re-register or need to register for the first time. And then while you're doing this, you can help them identify what's the best process to work for them, whether it's online or by mail or through their clerk's office or the polling place on election day. The timelines vary based on the method that people are going to use. So if you're going to register to vote online or by mail, you need to do so 20 days before the election. If you're going in person at your clerk's office, you have until the Friday before the election. Or it's good to know that if you're going to vote in person, you can register to vote on election day. What do you need in order to register? The answer to this question depends on which pathway you're going to use. If somebody is registering to vote online, all they need is their Wisconsin driver's license or ID card. But if they want to register by mail or in person, they're going to need an acceptable proof of residence document, and then either their driver's license or state ID number. This is if they've ever been issued a driver's license or state ID card. Or if they don't have one of those, they can use the last 4 digits of their social security number, or if they don't have either of those, there's a place where they can check that they don't have either of those. So I wanted to show this slide so you can see some examples of a proof of residence document. The important things to know is that it must include the person's name and then their current address, because proof of residence shows where the person lives. Some of the most common options are a driver's license with the person's current address on it, a utility bill, hunting license, or bank statement, credit card bill also counts, or any document that's been issued by a government entity that has the person's name and current address also works for a proof of residence document. I also want to just kind of quickly show you what the registration form looks like so that you have seen it before you go to help somebody. So the first part of the form, reviews the qualifications that we've already talked about. Person puts in their name, date of birth, their contact information. That's optional, but it is encouraged to do. The address where they live, and then their mailing address if it's different. If they've been registered before, they should put in where they've been registered before. Box 7 is where you would put in your driver's license number. Check the box that you're including a proof of residence document. The certification from the voter that all the information above is correct. And then at the bottom is the signature for the assistant. Anybody has the right to have assistants filling out this document. And if you help someone out by filling it out for them with the correct information, this is where you would sign the document as well. I do want to point out this part too, because on page 2 of the registration form, there is a box to indicate where somebody lives. If they do not have a street number, they can draw the map of where they live. And then there's also a spot where people can let their clerk know if they need any special accommodations at their polling site. And so this might be a helpful way to let your clerk know that you need the accommodations. I also want to just quickly do an overview of the MyVote website. I really encourage anybody who wants to help others with the voting process get familiar with the MyVote website. Not only can people register to vote online here, they can request an absentee ballot, they can view their sample ballot, they can get in contact with their municipal clerk through the site, and a few other things as well. So it is a really great resource for Wisconsinites. When people are going to the website, this is kind of a quick overview of what the process will look like to help you get familiar with it. But if they're going to register to vote online, they'd click register to vote. They'd enter their first name, last name, and date of birth. Click the search button so they can see if they have a previous record already in the system. If the person's not registered to vote, they would click the red button to register. And then they'll be prompted to walk through the website to confirm their eligibility, update their name and address if they need to, review the information, and then they can click submit and get registered to vote all online, which is really helpful. I also want to talk about photo ID for voting. So here in Wisconsin, we do have the photo ID law, so you need a photo ID in order to vote and get a ballot. On the screen are the acceptable photo ID options. The most common ones are somebody's driver's license or state ID card. A passport also works. One thing that I think is really important to highlight is the person's address does not need to be current on their photo ID for it to be valid for them to use to vote. So keep that in mind. I know my address on my photo ID is not current, and it's still the one that I use to go and vote. So just kind of remember that. And then I do, because we've kind of quickly gone over photo ID for voting and then also proof of residence for voting, I did want to show this image too that kind of helps separate the two because it is a common thing that people get confused about. So your proof of residence document is what you use to register to vote, and that proves where you live. Your photo ID is the document that proves who you are, and you use that to go and vote and to get your ballot. And this has some common examples of each of those here on the screen. Some tips as you go and help the people in your networks with voting, know that you don't need to know everything. If you don't know, definitely don't make it up because that can cause somebody to have the wrong information and lose their opportunity to vote. And it is, still a very helpful resource to somebody to connect them to the person who does have the information that they need. So even being a conduit to the correct information is a very great way to help people vote. Also, if you're helping them with the registration process or any other part of the voting process, keep in mind that you might see their, very private personal information. And so, just keep that information private. And then also know that your assistance is appreciated, and we're so glad that you're being part of this training and thinking through what you can do to help others vote. And then finally, I did want to share this quick list of resources on the screen. Here at the League of Women Voters, we're more than happy to be a resource for you. Reach out to us. I'd love to connect you to a local league in your area. I also want to highlight the Dane County / Wisconsin Voter ID Coalition. The phone number at the bottom of the screen here is the last one. They have volunteers ready to help with addressing any questions about the voter ID law, and then also to provide assistance with people who may need a witness for their absentee ballot. So those are going to be, I think, some big things coming up this fall, and so I just want to direct you to where you can find assistance, or voters in your network can find assistance as well. Okay, and that is all that I have, and I'm gonna kick it back over to Barbara. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Just had a little difficulty unmuting there. So thanks, Jenny, for assisting me.
Yes.
So I hope that the message that everyone is getting is that you are not alone. We're so glad you're here today to get this information, but just know that there are a wealth of partners, all of us on the call and many more that you just heard about, who are available to assist you. Next slide, please. All right, so in this portion of the training, we're really going to get into the weeds a little bit about absentee voting. Because of the risk of COVID-19, we are promoting absentee voting like never before. We really think that there's a public health imperative to absentee vote if at all possible. One issue that I do want to point out for some voters with disabilities is that Wisconsin currently doesn't have an ADA compliant screen reader accessible absentee ballot. So that means for a voter who is blind, for example, who would generally use the accessible voting machine when they go to vote in person so that they can vote privately and independently. Right now, Wisconsin does not have an absentee ballot that gives them equitable access. So that is something our coalition is working on and hope will be changing, but wanted you to be aware of that. So we are suggesting that your organizations have a script that you use for staff to ask your members about absentee voting. And we've got a sample on our website that you should feel free to borrow and adapt to work for your organization. This could be something that you include in a wellness call, in a home visit. If you are in some parts of the state, you may be having in-person gatherings. Any way that you're able to connect with people, that's the beauty of this, that we hope that you can modify it for your organization. You could do a phone banking or texting, depending on how you reach your members. So one very positive thing about Wisconsin is any registered Wisconsin voter is eligible to request an absentee ballot for any reason. That's not the case anywhere, so we're glad that Wisconsin does not have a barrier to requesting an absentee ballot. We encourage people to make the request as soon as possible for both August and November. I think you saw earlier in the training that we've got some deadlines that you should all be aware of. And for an absentee ballot, it's August 6th to get that request in. But since the election is the 11th, you really want to get it in before to have time to complete the ballot and return it. We have a tip for you. We have a newly updated Disability Vote Coalition absentee voting fact sheet, and we want you to check it out. All of these materials, including the script sample that I mentioned, are posted on the Disability Vote Coalition website. And following the training today, we'll have an updated resource list for everyone who attended this training. And we'll send the link out to you via email, or feel free to go to the website, disabilityvote.org. The resource list for today's training isn't up quite yet, but the materials are there. You just might have to hunt around a little to find them, but we'll have them all for you very soon in a easy to access table of contents format. Next slide, please. Okay, there are multiple ways to request an online, an absentee ballot. For those of us who have ready access to technology, an easy way to do it is using the My Vote website, which Eileen talked to you about a little bit before. It's really a very helpful resource. If the voter has not requested an absentee ballot before, they will be asked to upload a copy of their photo ID. Again, that can be something that can be a little tricky for some voters. They may not have the technology to do that, or they may not have the comfort level with the technology to do it. So that might be something where you can assist voters, asking if they need help with that photo ID upload. The ballot will then be mailed to the voter along with the return envelope. People can also request an absentee ballot by mail. We've got the link here for the form from the Wisconsin Election Commission website. Along with that, the voter has to have a copy of their acceptable photo ID, unless they're exempt by law, which we'll talk about in a minute. So that most commonly is either a driver's license or a state photo ID for voting, although there's a more comprehensive list that you can see at the link I gave here, bringit.gov. Oh, the format on the screen just changed. I don't know if you meant to do that, Jenny, but.
I did not. Let me see what's going on here. Sorry.
Yeah, the PowerPoint went away, but I can keep talking. So if voters have requested it by mail, they should mail it, complete the form as soon as possible, mail it to their clerk's office. And again, this is something where you could be helpful. You could print out copies of applications for absentee ballots and provide them to your members. If someone tells you they need one, you could mail it out to them. So a lot of different ways that you could share that with them. I want you to go to the next slide. I still don't see the slides.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it's doing this to me.
Gosh, well, I'll just keep talking and hopefully technology will work itself out here. We've got an expert struggling with it, so thank you, Jenny. Ah, there we go. Excellent. Thank you so much, Jenny. We're on the second screen for how to request an absentee ballot, so just back up one, please. Perfect. So these are the other ways that you can request an absentee ballot. Voters can email their clerk with their request. And on that request, we've listed out the information that needs to be provided. Their name, their Wisconsin voting address, the election they'd like a ballot for. So you can either request it just for the August election or for the rest of the calendar year. That's what we would recommend people do. And also if the mailing address is different than the voting address, which people may be staying with a family member right now because of the pandemic, there are a lot of reasons they might have a different mailing address. So that's important to remember. Again, you have to have a copy of your photo ID with the email if it's not already on file. And then the final way, and this is a really good thing to be aware of if it's not already on your radar, is many communities offer what's called early in-person absentee voting. This might be at the municipal clerk's office. In some of the larger communities in our state, including Madison and Milwaukee, they have other locations in town where people can do in-person absentee. Now, the recent decision by the 7th Circuit Court limited the amount of time for in-person absentee voting, which we were disappointed to see that because especially in a time of pandemic, this is a good option for people. It's usually not very crowded, so people can still go and vote in person, but more safely than they may be able to do on election day. So this is something where Wisconsin, we're the most decentralized voting system in the country of any state. So there's a lot of variation from community to community. So what you will want to do is get to know the municipal clerk for the community that you live in or the communities where your members live. And in the case of in-person absentee voting, find out the dates and hours where that's being offered. It may be on their website. It may not be. Best bet, contact the municipal clerk and get that information down. So just a tip for you, if you have a voter who needs to register to vote and also wants to absentee vote, and maybe time is short, this can be a very good option for them because they can register in person after the deadline for online or mail registration has closed. So gives you a little more flexibility. Next slide, please. So this next slide, we get into an area that I think is so important for you to know as advocates who are helping voters with disabilities and older adults to vote. And that is, what is an indefinitely confined voter? Wisconsin law has an option for voters who are, and this is right out of the legal language, indefinitely confined because of age, physical illness, or infirmity, or disabled for an indefinite period, to sign a statement to that effect when requesting an absentee ballot. So this will mean a couple of things. First, it'll mean that an absentee ballot will be sent to them automatically for every election, not this year, not only this year, but every year. So that can be a great thing because they've got it taken care of. In addition, indefinitely confined voters are not required to provide a copy of their photo ID. This issue of providing a photo ID can really be tough for many voters with disabilities and older adults. Many are non-drivers, they don't have a driver's license, they don't have a passport. It can be extremely difficult for them to get to the DMV. That story that I told you before about the gentleman who had MS and was confined to bed and couldn't get to the DMV, and his sister shared how heartbroken he was because he couldn't vote because he didn't have that ID. He was absolutely an indefinitely confined voter. If the family or the social worker had knowledge of this area of the law, they would have been able to indicate that and he would have been able to vote. But our voting system is way too complicated. Hopefully with your assistance, a lot more voters who may have this barrier will be able to vote. One question that's come up is people often, when I talk to them about indefinitely confined, they say, well, I'm not indefinitely confined. I leave my house. that isn't what it means. This is an individual call. This is right from the Election Commission for each voter to make based upon their circumstances. It does not require permanent or total inability to apply outside of the residence. Statutes do not establish the requirement to provide proof or documentation. And the way I've also heard it explained is if there is a voter who, because of age, physical illness, infirmity, or disability, has a difficult time getting to their polling place, they may select the option of indefinitely confined. And that is something that is selected either on your absentee ballot application in section 6 of the form, and we'll show you where you select it online, or you can send that in writing to your municipal clerk. So that's an area that I hope you'll be able to increase awareness of so that we don't have more individuals like the gentleman I told you about who aren't able to vote because they don't know about this provision. Next slide, please. So just to give you a little bit better feel for the screens in the MyVote system, since absentee voting is so important, thought it might be helpful to do a very quick walkthrough. So I had used MyVote to request my absentee ballot for the next election. So one thing that I'll notice is because I have previously uploaded my photo ID, that screen didn't come up. It's not something that you need to do each time. So I've got most of the screens here, but that important one is not included. So here's the first thing. You just select vote absentee from the main menu. Then you search by the voter's name. And if you have permission, you can assist a voter with this process. So name, first and last name and date of birth. Next screen, please. Oh, the one thing that's mentioned on there too is in terms of browsers, they really recommend using the Chrome browser. People have had some difficulties with MyVote using older browsers. So just wanted to get that on your radar. Okay, here's the second screen. You are able to choose all that apply. So you confirm that the name and address are correct. If you want your ballot mailed to a different address, you indicate that here. If you're an active military voter, and then the provision I was talking about, I am indefinitely confined due to age, illness, infirmity, or disability, and request ballots be sent to me for every election until I am no longer confined or fail to return a ballot. So this is where the voter selects it. And it is important for them then to regularly return their ballots so that they maintain that indefinitely confined status. Next screen, please. Okay, then you have the option of requesting an absentee ballot either for all elections for the remainder of the year, or you can specify if you want August only or November only. Next screen. And on this screen, you are reviewing what you've put in and you are submitting it, and you're actually certifying there. So this is like taking an oath that you meet the criteria, that you're a qualified elector, a US citizen, at least 18 years old, that you meet some of the criteria related to being in the criminal justice system, not currently serving a sentence, including probation or parole for a felony conviction, which would disqualify someone from voting. And you certify that all the statements are true. And again, so if someone is indicating that they're indefinitely confined, they're certifying that. So there are some people have challenged the idea of this provision. We think it's really important, and people certify it just as they do the other provisions. Next screen, please. Okay, so at this point, the voter, in this case me, has completed submitting the request for an absentee ballot. And then this is a really great thing to know about, that there is tracking information. So on here, they show the day that my ballot request was received. And then eventually it'll show when the absentee ballot was mailed to me, and then that the completed ballot was received. We had so many issues in the April election where people were unsure about the status of their ballots. So we found this screen to be really helpful. And in some cases, seemed to be once in a while there was a glitch where people thought they had completed requesting an absentee ballot and they hadn't actually done so. So by checking the status, you're able to clarify whether or not your ballot request was completed and received. Next screen. So anyhow, that's a little bit of a heads up of the process of requesting that absentee ballot. The next area that's also very important is once the voter gets their absentee ballot, they need to complete it and return it as soon as possible. There are very specific instructions that are included. So that might be something where if the voters you work with have questions, that you could be a helpful resource. Again, you want to use a blue or black pen. For the August primary, voters need to choose a political party. You can only vote for candidates within that political party. That's important. Want to review your name and address on the return envelope, make sure it's correct. Put your ballot in the return envelope and sign it and date it. Then very important, we've talked about that Wisconsin requires a witness to sign that certificate envelope. Again, you could be a witness for your voters. The only requirement is that someone be an adult US citizen. So that's important for folks to know. You may have people working for your agency who are not US citizens. I know one of my colleagues, her husband isn't a citizen. And because of quarantine during the pandemic, she really had difficulty getting a witness, but she was finally able to figure it out. So next screen, please. Returning an absentee ballot, also very important, must be returned no later than 8 p.m. on election day. If you're mailing it, if it's less than a week in advance, you can't really feel confident that it's going to get there in time. So you can look at other options. Your community may have a drop box where you can drop off the ballot. You may have to take it to your polling place. You can do that on election day, or it can be delivered to the clerk's office. It's important to note that a voter may choose to ask someone else to deliver their completed sealed ballot for them. So that's something, again, where you may be able to assist a voter with that process. Next screen. So just a couple quick things about voting in person during a pandemic. As you've noticed during this training, we really encourage absentee voting by mail or in person. But there are going to be people who, for whatever reason, aren't able to get an absentee ballot in time. They aren't registered. They need to vote in person. So first of all, that MyVote website's very important. Polling places change. They don't stay the same. So check first, make sure they have their current polling place. Be prepared. Review your ballot online at myvote.wi.gov. That way the voter can go into the polling place knowing who they want to vote for, get in and out fast. They should check in advance to make sure they're registered at their current address. People with disabilities and older adults may relocate for a variety of reasons. If they're at a new address, they may have to re-register. So that can be something they can do online with your assistance, or they may do it at their polling place and they'll need to bring proof of residence with their new address. Curbside voting, Denise will talk a little bit about that, but that's something where it's helpful to plan ahead. Bring your photo ID with you and a black or blue pen to mark your ballot. Bring It to the Ballot is a great website that has a list of acceptable photo IDs. We encourage people to wear a mask. If you must get out of your car to vote, practice social distancing and wash your hands before and after you vote. A lot of communities offered, in addition to curbside voting, drive-up voting during the April election, and we think that that may be the case in the future as well. So at this point, I am going to turn it over to Janet Zander, who is going to talk about voters in care facilities. Take it away, Janet, please.
All right. So as you've heard, voting during a pandemic is not necessarily the way it's happening at other times. Typically, voters who are in residential care facilities or in care facilities, and by this I mean voters who are in nursing homes, community-based residential facilities that are serving at least 10 unrelated adults, adult family homes, qualified retirement homes, and I won't even get into that since we're not going to be talking about this very much, but residential care apartment complexes. These individuals used to have access to, under normal circumstances, what are called special voting deputies. And these are folks who are appointed by a municipal clerk during an election to conduct absentee voting at these facilities. They are trained and they are the only people who can then provide assistance. But earlier, this year, after the April and May elections and after the pandemic displayed all of the barriers that we faced and are going to continue to face, our commissioners from the Wisconsin Election Commission made a decision that we would not be using special voting deputies in these residential care facilities for the remainder of the elections in 2020. So for August and November elections, we will not have access again to special voting deputies. This means these individuals are really going to need some very specialized attention in order to make sure that they still have access to voting. Specifically, this means that we need to make sure that folks who aren't going to be receiving a letter, the Wisconsin Elections Commission is going to send a letter to care facilities providing some information about voting for the August and November elections, and they're going to be providing some training to them. They're also going to be doing a mailing, and that mailing will include an absentee ballot for each resident who already has an absentee ballot request on file. But as many of you know, care facilities are, people move in and out of those sometimes. And so there may well be many residents residing in any of those facilities who does not have an absentee ballot request on file. So they will not automatically be sent an absentee ballot. For those folks, we really need to make sure that someone is providing the assistance that they need to make sure that they're registered, to make sure that they request an absentee ballot, and can still have the assistance that they need to participate in the voting process. For those who do get the absentee ballot application automatically, we still want to make sure that they receive the assistance that they need, since they won't have special voting deputies, from staff and from others who are working with them to make sure that they meet all of the criteria needed and meet the deadlines established. So that means making sure that they have a witness signature provided on their return envelope, making sure that the ballot actually gets put into the mail in time for their vote to count. That assistance is going to be really critical under these circumstances. And in order to make sure those ballots count, we have to make sure that they are in the clerk's office or returned to the polling sites by 8 o'clock on election day, or they will not be counted, and all of that work will be for naught. Next slide, please. When specifying, when doing applications for absentee voting, as you heard from Barbara, people have the option to specify if they are indefinitely confined, and they'll continue to get ballots then for all future elections. They can also specify just for the remaining elections in 2020. So if they are applying for absentee ballots in August, they could also apply right away for November, so the process doesn't have to be repeated again. Or if they intend not to be in that facility after the August election, they can just choose the August election. But know that those are options that are intended to make it at least a little bit easier for future elections. Here again, we have the dates outlined for the August election, the one coming up most quickly on the August 11th for online and mail registration, which closes on Wednesday, July 22nd. So that means that clock is ticking pretty quickly in order to get registrations completed. That work needs to, in order to be timely, we really need to get that work done very, very quickly. And that means updating names, updating addresses, whatever needs to be accomplished to get that voter registration completed. If there's a resident in a facility that doesn't have an active absentee ballot on file, they're going to need to request one, and they'll do that in a couple of different ways. One is submitting in writing to the municipal clerk the fact that they would like to receive a ballot. They will, because they're not automatically going to get one, they're going to have to submit something in writing to make that happen. The deadline to make that request for this upcoming election is Thursday, August 6th. So again, timeline's clicking pretty fast for regular voters and for those who are indefinitely confined, and I would guess that that would apply to many people in residential care facilities. That would be Friday, August 7th. And these are, again, voters who, due to age, illness, infirmity, or disability, would be considered indefinitely confined. Next slide, please. There are a variety of options available for residents in care facilities to provide proof of residency. The easiest one is often the intake form from the facility that's being collected automatically, and they have it on file and it shows that this person is living at this address. But other options would include things like a bank statement that the individual might get, as long as it contains their current address, and as well as any other government documented issues, Medicare, Social Security statements, things like that. Again, as long as their name and address are current on those documents, those could be used to identify proof of residency. I'm going to quickly transition, in light of our time, to Denise, who's going to talk to us about voting under guardianship and voter rights. Take it away, Denise.
There we go. Thanks so much, Janet. I'm Denise Jess. I am the CEO of the Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired, and proud to be a member of the Disability Vote Coalition. One of our most fundamental rights for all voters is to be able to cast our ballot privately and independently. And so for voters with disabilities, there are many barriers to being able to do that. And so I want to take a few minutes to cover what are the specific rights that support our ability to cast that private and independent ballot. And I'm going to start with the guardianship question. I've seen it pop up in the chat multiple times today as well. So in Wisconsin, people who are under guardianship are able to vote unless it is specifically revoked by a court. So again, unless it's specifically revoked by a court, people under guardianship have the right to vote. How will I know if I'm under guardianship, or if a client that you're working with is under guardianship and has that right revoked? You need to consult a specific form. And the name of that form is the Determination and Order on Petition for Guardianship Due to Incapacitation. So that's a mouthful. The number for that form is a GN 3170. That document, while it does not specifically say whether a voter can vote, there will be a checkbox on that document. If that box is checked, then it means that the voter, that person cannot vote according to court decree. So you need to look to see whether that box is checked. How can you get a copy of that form if you don't have one or don't have access to one? The voter or the individual can ask their guardian to provide it. It can also be obtained through the county that the individual lives in, through their their probate court office, and it's a $2 cost for that form, and then it can be verified whether or not the person under guardianship can vote. Another alternative, if we're not able to obtain that form, is to reach out to the municipal clerk in the community in which that person lives. The municipal clerk will have an updated list of those who cannot vote due to incapacitation, and you can consult with the clerk to see if this individual is on that list or not. It's super important to know that if someone under guardianship has had their right to vote revoked, they can petition to have the right reinstated, and that would need to be looked at by the courts. The court really is the only determiner of whether someone is considered competent to vote or not. The guardian can't make that decision. The other family members can't make that decision. It is specifically a court decision. Go ahead, Jennifer. Jenny, go ahead and do the next slide. Overall, there are a number of rights that are put in place for voters with disabilities, and I think it's really important to know these like the back of your hand, because there's a lot of confusion about them. There are sometimes poll workers, well-intended, or who will misquote the rights, and so knowing them for your particular individual clients and folks that you work with is going to be really, really vital. A lot of these rights are specifically going to deal with in-person voting. As Barbara mentioned, in the state of Wisconsin right now, we don't have an absentee accessible voting option. And so for that reason, a variety of others, often some populations, particularly people who are Black and brown, may not trust the absentee process. You may need to register at the polls. You may not have gotten your absentee ballot. So there are, even in a pandemic, some compelling reasons why folks might want to or need to show up at their polling places. I will personally be faced with the incredibly tough decision about, do I exercise my right to cast a free, independent and private ballot at my polling place, or do I complete an absentee ballot that I cannot see and will need assistance for? So tough call. So when the voter chooses to vote in person at the polling place or at the early in-person election site, they have the right to be able to access that building, and that includes the pathway up to the building. This is particularly important with that November election. Wisconsin could have snow or ice on the ground at that point. And so it is the responsibility of the municipality to make sure that that pathway is clear and accessible for voters to be able to get into and navigate through that building. Voters also have the right to have access to the accessible voting equipment. And again, that is a freestanding machine that will allow the voter who cannot see, read, or physically mark the ballot to be able to vote independently. And that machine, by law, is required to be in the polling place on the day of the election. Depending on the municipality, that machine may or may not be set up properly, may or may not have an up-to-date printer cartridge, but it needs to be set up. If you are someone who uses the accessible voting equipment, or someone you're supporting or advocating on behalf of uses it, my high recommendation would be to reach out to the municipal clerk in advance of the election to let them know that you need access to that piece of equipment so that it is set up, functioning, ready to go, hopefully, so that you reduce the amount of time that you have to be in the polling place. Additionally, the accessible equipment is not required by law to be there during early absentee voting. Hopefully it is. Many municipalities continue to offer it, but by law, they are not required to offer it. You have the right to use that equipment. No one can question you to say, what is your disability? Should you be using this? You don't look disabled to me. Those are all things that we've heard as barriers for people having access to that equipment. any voter, whether they have a disability or not, is allowed to use that accessible voting equipment. Additionally, you have the right to have assistance when you vote. We've mentioned this earlier. I want to reinforce it. You can bring someone with you to the polling place if you wish to do that. You can ask an elections official to do that if you wish, and election officials, if requested, are required under state law to help you complete your ballot. So they cannot decline or tell you that they're not allowed to. They absolutely are allowed to do that. The only people who cannot assist you with completing your ballot are your employer or your union representative. Otherwise, anybody else can be an assister. You have the right to, you can switch slides. You have the right to have assistance, reasonable accommodations under the law as well. So reasonable accommodations could be a number of different things. Perhaps a chair to sit on to be able to cast your ballot would be helpful. Perhaps a signature guide to place in the poll book so that you're able to sign the poll book. Also placing an X on your line in the poll book is a reasonable accommodation. Having access to a magnifying glass. If you, for whatever reason, can't state your name and address, someone can do that on your behalf. All of those, again, are reasonable accommodations that you simply just need to ask for, and you do not need to give proof of disability in order to have access to those things. If for any reason you or the person that you're supporting cannot get into the polling place, by law, curbside voting is an option in Wisconsin. Again, we'd highly, highly recommend that you call your clerk in advance of going to vote to let them know that you need the curbside option. Because sometimes the signage is confusing or where to pull up, or there might not be a contact phone number. I know I heard a story about voters were expected to pull up far enough and then beep, and then there were windows that the poll workers saw them pull up and then were supposed to run out during the April election. But voters didn't know that, so they weren't pulling up far enough for their beeps to be heard, and then got discouraged and thought that there wasn't curbside. So call in advance, find out what the procedures and any phone numbers are for curbside voting. The Elections Commission is making signage available to municipal clerks, and on that signage, there's also a space to put a phone number so that those needing curbside should be able to find it. Okay. I think we can switch slides. So if you have any concerns about accessibility or that you're not getting what you need in order to be able to vote, the first person to go to at your polling place is absolutely the chief elections inspector. And this is a person who is responsible for that polling site. And they should have a good oversight of the polling site. They should have a good oversight of the rights for voters with disabilities. Go to them first. When I showed up at my polling place in February, there were no signature guides in the materials box that day. And so when I asked for a signature guide, there wasn't one. And the chief inspector for my polling place was awesome. He started constructing one out of cardboard immediately so that they would have one for the remainder of the day. He then went out and shoveled the snow so that voters could get into the polling place. So start there. I would highly encourage voters to have the phone number for the municipal clerk with them. So if they don't get resolution as they need it from the chief election inspector, that they can go directly to the municipal clerk. They can give that person a call. They can ask for their issue to be resolved. And again, if you or your voter doesn't know who their municipal clerk is, the myvote.wi.gov website is a rich resource for that. You can put in the voter address and it will tell you who the municipal clerk is and give you that contact information. If you find that even after those immediate remedies, that things are not resolved to your satisfaction, you have some other ways that you can continue to escalate your concerns. And we can go to the next slide. You can reach out directly to the Disability Rights Wisconsin voter hotline, and on election day, that line is answered by real live human beings, and they will do an outstanding job with you to problem solve issues that might be coming up. So potentially you might be running into a transportation issue and need to help someone resolve a transportation problem, or someone's not quite sure how, where their polling site has moved if we end up having moving polling sites. That the folks on that hotline can definitely assist. Additionally, the Wisconsin Elections Commission runs a voter hotline. You'll see the phone numbers here. If you aren't able to see the screens, they will be available to you on the materials afterwards. I'll save time by not reading the numbers off. But reach out to the Elections Commission on election day. Again, that phone will be answered throughout the day. Typically it's 7:45 to 4:30, but on election day, that phone will be answered while the polls are open. So reach out there again and let folks know. And again, your municipal clerk is an excellent resource. And we can go ahead and switch slides. There is value to being able to file a complaint. So if your voting concerns are not rectified by calling the helpline, if they're not rectified by talking with your clerk or the Elections Commission, you can file a complaint. And sometimes folks don't want to do that because they don't want to be that person. And we would highly encourage the voter directly or anyone who is supporting that voter to file a complaint, because it may hopefully help remedy the situation going forward. Not only does it benefit that particular voter, you're giving a tremendous gift to other voters with disabilities and elder voters and maybe other community members by raising the awareness of what the issue is. Barbara mentioned earlier that during this year of pandemic, we will not be conducting audits at polling places. So the other thing that is so valuable is your complaint helps raise up these issues that might go unnamed if because of the audit program not being able to run. So there are a couple different ways that you can do that. One, I think we can go ahead to the next slide. Yeah. Oh, no, I'm sorry. We do need to go back. I apologize. I'm ahead of myself. So you can go to the Elections Commission website, and there is a complaint process on their website. And a new feature was added just early this summer that is accessibility focused exclusively. And that is awesome. We want to thank our friends at the Elections Commission for doing that. It's got some drop-down menus that can be accessed, so you can put in the specific concern that the voter was running into, and then that data can be collected. The voting specialists at WEC Wisconsin Elections Commission, can then check in with that municipal clerk and that polling site to help remedy the issues in the future. And that clerk can receive materials that she or he can use on site as well for accessibility. So you can do a complaint that way. You can ask for a form to be mailed or emailed to you so you can complete it. There is a very formalized complaint process that requires a notary, so that one we know has some barriers with it, but these other complaint processes are incredibly useful for helping to reduce the barriers for you and for other voters to come. So I'm going to take a pause there and hand the reins over to Jenny, who is going to focus with you on tips for moving forward board and how you can support your members very specifically.
Oh, thank you, Denise. And we are at time, so I will move through these quickly, and we'll continue recording. We understand if people have to go, but we will be available to answer questions even though we're at time here. So feel free if you have the time to stick around with us. So some tips on being an informed voter. A lot of times we hear one of the big barriers for people with disabilities voting is not knowing enough about the candidates to really decide who they want to vote for. So you can help them like visiting websites, encourage them to watch candidate forums or interviews. You can follow the candidates on social media. That's a really great way to find out what their values are and how they feel about different issues. And if it's somebody who's an incumbent who's been in office for a while, you can even go and visit their past voting record. You can also visit vote411.org to find nonpartisan information about candidates. And some people with disabilities may need a lot of help with that, but those are the best ways to find out information about candidates. You can also help educate candidates in the community about disability issues, and we have some key questions already made up that you can ask candidates. So if you're at a town hall meeting or something like that, or a candidate forum, you can ask those questions or put them on social media. We have someone who's not muted. If you could please mute, that would be very helpful. And then you can certainly follow the Disability Vote Coalition and sign up for our e-newsletter. And different ways for your agency to make a difference. We've talked about some of these, so I'll go quickly. Again, develop a plan to support your members, just being aware of what the deadlines are, knowing the basics about registering, voting, absentee, and photo ID, which we just went through. So you know, you can revisit this PowerPoint. We've talked about the resources that are on our website, and you can always call our hotline for assistance. We've really encouraged leadership to identify a designated voting person to be liaison with our agency and the people that you work with so that it becomes a priority and doesn't get lost. And then we can work with you to develop a plan to provide resources. So we can provide a script. We have that available on our website. All our voting materials can be mailed to you, or you can go online, share links, or print them yourselves. We have really nice postcards that we could mail to you, and you could take those when you're doing home visits. We have a monthly e-newsletter that can easily be forwarded to staff and your members. We can do individual trainings if you have a group of members or other staff in your agency. We'd be happy to do a training such as this one. And then, you know, through the voter hotline, we can provide one-on-one assistance. So if you find yourself in a, you know, maybe a little over your head, just shoot them our way and we'll take it from there. And we have a very active social media presence on our Facebook page, and we put together a monthly calendar of posts, and we are happy to share that. So you've got posts for a whole month in advance. You can just plug them into your Facebook page on a schedule and not even have to think about it the rest of the time. So we'd be more than happy to share that calendar with everyone. We talked about different ways to partner with the voting hotline. Those are the ways you can get a hold of us. Our email address. The Wisconsin Vote Coalition has all the resource materials. We talked about the training and the newsletter. And again, you can join our email list either by signing up at our website, disabilityvote.org, or shooting us an email. And the League of Women Voters is always ready and willing to partner. They've been a fantastic partner. And there's chapters all around the state that Eileen had talked about earlier. Next step is to review the resources, including that outreach script that we have up there. We talked about partnering ideas, and we have a My Voting plan. So it's helpful to just think ahead of time, what do you need to do with each member to make sure that this gets done? And we've got a plan to help walk you through that on our website. Barbara mentioned the absentee voting fact sheet. So that's very specific to absentee voting, which is what we are heavily promoting for these next 2 elections. And then there is a more general voting frequently asked questions document online that's current. We have information for residential service providers, and we have a product list, so you can look at that list. It's a little like cheat sheet of what we have, so you know what you can request or find online. And we do have several videos as well. They're short, they're accessible, and we encourage people to share those videos. Again, the resources specific to this training will be posted online, so you have them in one place, probably within the next couple days. So developing your plan, give the script, use the script when you do well checks or any in-home things when you're checking in with clients. If you could just include voting as one of the things that you're touching base on, that alone would increase the chances of people with disabilities voting. Work with us to schedule virtual trainings, share our frequently asked questions with your staff if they couldn't make the training, refer voters that need help to us, and then we can get you the social media content I talked about. And then July is a big month. This week is National Disability Voter Registration Week, which is through AAPD's Rev Up campaign. We provided a link there if you want more information, but we're doing this training. We've got a training for self-advocates tomorrow. We have a press event on Thursday. So there's lots of different things. If you check our Facebook page, ideas that you could help promote the voter registration week, including just sharing our social media posts. And then also think about lots of people are promoting the 30th anniversary of the ADA on July 26th. And we've been combining voting with that. So anytime we talk about the 30th anniversary, we squeeze voting in there. So you could do that as well. And I know Barbara has probably been furiously answering questions in the chat box, and I see there have been many. But for those of you who've been able to hang in there, if you have any questions that have not yet been addressed, feel free to put them in the chat room, and we will try to get to them. So Barbara, are you or anyone else seeing any different questions to address?
Thanks, Jenny. There were a lot of really terrific questions, and I think that we caught them all. And I also want to thank the Wisconsin Election Commission, because I always want to make sure we're giving current and correct information. And there were a few things where I had to reach out, and the assistant director over there, Richard Radecki, was very responsive. And so we can be confident that these, with all the changes with litigation and so on, sometimes it's a little unclear. So these answers are current and accurate.
There was one question from Heather about the mail-in deadlines for registering to vote and then to request an absentee ballot, and whether or not those are postmarks or deadlines to receive it. I know for registering to vote by mail, the deadline is a postmark date. And then to request an absentee ballot, I believe that's a receive by deadline, but I don't, Barbara, do you know that your understanding as well?
Yes, that's my understanding too. Thanks, Eileen.
So it is weird that it's two different processes for the different things, but yep, that's the answer.
Well, we really appreciate folks sticking around. Oh, Janet, you were going to say something. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
That's quite all right. I was just going to thank everyone for sticking with us and wondering if we could provide an email address where those who still have questions maybe could send. we put something in the chat box where they could send any additional questions?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that would be our general email that we had up before. Barbara will put it in the chat, but info@disabilityvote.org. And again, that's a great way to get a hold of us anytime anything comes up. I just want to reiterate that you're not alone, as Barbara said. We're here to help, but you are the best conduits to get this information directly to your members. All right, so thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
And you will get the resources in an email within the next day or two. Thank you.
And thanks for your advocacy to support voters. We know you're going to make a difference. Oops. Ah.